I am a contractor by trade. My father was a contractor before me and his father before him. 3 generations of calloused hands, sunburnt necks, and honest work. My F-450 Super Duty is not just a truck. It is the backbone of my business. A mobile workshop carrying everything from power tools to lumber to the custom cabinetry I build for clients across 3 counties. The truck is massive. I do not deny that fact. 8.5 feet wide with extended mirrors and nearly 22 feet long. It is a beast, but it is a necessary one. After purchasing my 2-bedroom apartment at Sunnyvale Gardens 3 years ago, I quickly realized my work truck would be an issue in the standard-sized parking spaces. Being proactive, I approached management before ever bringing the truck home. Mrs. Rodriguez in the leasing office was understanding from the beginning. Many of our residents work in construction, she explained, reviewing the property map spread across her desk. We actually have several options for contractors like yourself. The solution was simple and fair. For an additional monthly fee added to my HOA dues, I received written permission to use 2 adjacent parking spots at the far end of the lot, spots number 47 and 48. They were not the closest to my building, but they were perfect for my needs, positioned near the exit, away from most foot traffic, and back-to-back with a concrete barrier rather than another parking space. I thanked Mrs. Rodriguez, signed the appropriate paperwork, and considered the matter settled. For the first 2 years and 10 months, it was settled. I came and went without issue, carefully positioning my truck within the boundaries of my assigned spaces, being mindful of my neighbors, and keeping my truck as clean as a work vehicle can reasonably be. No one ever complained. Often, other contractors in the complex would stop by to admire the custom rack system I had installed or the specialized toolboxes built into the bed. It was a point of pride, that truck. Evidence of hard work and business success. The first time I noticed her watching me was on a Tuesday evening in early September. I had just returned from a particularly difficult bathroom renovation job, my clothes covered in drywall dust and sweat. The setting sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as I carefully backed my truck into my spaces, making sure to align perfectly between the lines. That was when I spotted her on the second-floor balcony of Building C, a woman in her late 40s, arms crossed tightly over her chest, staring down at me with unmistakable disapproval. I nodded politely, assuming she might be a new resident unfamiliar with the parking arrangement. Her response was a tightening of her already pinched expression before she disappeared inside her unit. I thought little of it at the time. In a community of over 150 units, you cannot expect everyone to be friendly. I gathered my lunch cooler and personal tools, locked up my truck, and headed to my apartment for a much-needed shower. Just someone having a bad day, I told myself, not yet understanding that her arrival at Sunnyvale Gardens marked the beginning of a calculated campaign against not just my parking spaces, but my livelihood and peace of mind. If I had known then what was coming, perhaps I would have acted differently that first evening. Perhaps I would have immediately addressed her concerns or documented that first hostile glare. But hindsight, as they say, is 20/20. And the storm brewing on that balcony was about to rain down on my life in ways I could never have anticipated. The first note appeared 3 days later, tucked aggressively under my windshield wiper, the paper crinkled as if placed there with considerable force. I spotted it immediately upon approaching my truck at 5:30 in the morning, the paper stark white against the dark windshield in the pre-dawn light. Assuming it was a flyer for local services, I plucked it free and nearly tossed it aside before the aggressive red underlining caught my eye. The handwriting was tight and precise, the pressure of the pen nearly tearing through the paper in places. Notice, you are selfishly taking up 2 parking spaces in a community where parking is already limited. Your inconsiderate behavior affects everyone. Move your oversized vehicle off-site or expect consequences. A concerned resident. I stood in the empty parking lot, reading the note twice more, genuinely confused. My arrangement was official, approved, and paid for monthly. This was not a misunderstanding about an occasional parking violation. This was someone unaware of the formal agreement. I folded the note carefully and placed it in my glove box, making a mental note to stop by the management office later that day to ensure there had not been changes to the policy I was unaware of. That afternoon, I spotted her again as I returned home, the same woman from the balcony, now walking briskly across the parking lot. Deciding to address the issue directly, I pulled into my spaces and approached her with a friendly wave. "Excuse me, ma'am. I think there might be a misunderstanding about my parking situation. I actually have permission from management to use these 2 spaces for my work truck. I pay extra for." "I am well aware of what you claim," she interrupted, her voice carrying across the lot. "But as a member of the HOA board, I can tell you that oversized vehicles like yours are explicitly prohibited in our bylaws regardless of what some office worker might have told you." I blinked, taken aback by both her tone and the information. "I have a signed agreement," I explained calmly. "Mrs. Rodriguez in the office." "Rodriguez no longer works here," she cut in again, her eyes narrowed. "And any arrangements she made without board approval are not valid. The board will be reviewing all special parking permissions at our next meeting." She glanced pointedly at my truck. "That monstrosity takes up space that 2 families could use. It is inconsiderate and against regulations." Before I could respond, she walked away, phone already pressed to her ear. I stood there, dust-covered and confused, wondering if I had indeed misunderstood something fundamental about my living situation for nearly 3 years. The next morning brought another shock. My email inbox contained a community-wide message from the Sunnyvale Gardens HOA board regarding parking violations and community standards. While it did not mention me by name, the message included a poorly angled photograph of my truck with the statement, "Some residents are abusing parking privileges and taking multiple spaces with commercial vehicles. This behavior will no longer be tolerated." The message was forwarded from an email address I did not recognize, k.miller@sunnyvalehoa.org. Over the following week, 3 more community emails followed, each more pointed than the last. Neighbors began giving me curious looks. Once friendly faces now avoided eye contact in the mailroom. When I finally made it to the management office, the new property manager, a nervous young man named Tyler, seemed uncomfortable discussing the situation. "Well, yes, we do have record of your agreement," he said, glancing at his computer screen. "But Ms. Miller has filed 7 official complaints about your vehicle in the past week. She insists it violates Section 8 of the bylaws regarding commercial vehicles." He slid a printout across the desk. "Maybe you could find alternative parking for a while until this blows over. Ms. Miller can be persistent." I left the office with a hollow feeling in my stomach. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate campaign against me by someone who had appointed herself the authority over my living situation. And somehow, despite having documentation on my side, I was the one being asked to compromise. Little did I know that this was only the opening salvo in Karen Miller's war against my F-450, and by extension, against me and my livelihood. The morning everything changed began like any other. My alarm blared at 4:45 a.m., giving me just enough time to shower, gulp down coffee, and load the final materials for my meeting with the Hendersons, a wealthy couple interested in a complete kitchen renovation, potentially worth over $80,000. This was not just another job. It represented the kind of high-end client that could transform my small contracting business. I had prepared detailed mock-ups, material samples, and a comprehensive estimate. Everything was loaded in my truck, ready for the 7:30 a.m. meeting. At 5:20 a.m., I stepped outside my apartment, travel mug in hand, only to freeze mid-step. The parking lot lights illuminated a scene that made my blood run cold. A tow truck was backing up toward my F-450, its yellow lights casting an eerie glow across the pre-dawn darkness. A figure stood nearby, pointing authoritatively. Karen Miller, dressed as if prepared for an office job despite the early hour, clutching a folder of papers. I broke into a run. "Stop! What are you doing? That is my vehicle," I shouted, waving frantically at the tow operator, a heavy-set man already preparing the hook mechanism. The operator looked up, clearly uncomfortable. "Sir, I have an authorization for removal of an illegally parked commercial vehicle, signed by HOA management." "There is no authorization," I said firmly, trying to keep my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. "I have assigned rights to these spaces. I pay extra for them monthly." I turned to Karen. "You know this. I told you about my arrangement." Karen stepped forward, holding up what appeared to be an official document. "This vehicle violates 3 separate HOA bylaws. As acting board secretary, I have the authority to have it removed." The tow operator looked between us, clearly sensing a dispute. "Look, I just go where I am dispatched, if there is a disagreement." "There is no disagreement," I interrupted, rushing to my apartment and returning moments later with my folder of documentation. "Here is my signed agreement for both spaces, dated 3 years ago and still valid. Here are my payment receipts showing the additional parking fee every month." I thrust the papers toward the operator. "This is harassment, plain and simple." The driver reviewed my documents, then radioed his dispatch. After several tense minutes of verification, he packed up his equipment. "Sorry for the trouble, sir. Seems there was a miscommunication." By the time the matter was resolved, it was 6:45 a.m. With morning traffic, I had no chance of making my 7:30 appointment across town. Frantic calls to the Hendersons went unanswered. When I finally reached them at 8:15, they coldly informed me they had hired another contractor who had actually shown up on time. That evening, after calculating the potential loss of the Henderson contract, I spotted Karen in the parking lot and approached her, my frustration barely contained. "Do you realize what happened today? Your false towing attempt cost me a major client. That is actual financial damage because of your lies." Karen turned to me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Perhaps, if you had a real profession instead of your dirty truck-driving handyman business, you would not need to inconvenience an entire community with your eyesore of a vehicle." I stepped back, stunned by the naked contempt in her voice. Before I could respond, she added, "Besides, if you had left at your usual 5:25 instead of running late this morning, you might have avoided the whole situation." The implication hit me like a physical blow. She had timed the tow truck deliberately, and she knew my schedule, my comings and goings, with disturbing precision. As she walked away, I stood motionless in the gathering darkness, the realization dawning that this was not a neighbor dispute about parking spaces. This was targeted harassment by someone monitoring my movements, someone willing to sabotage my livelihood, someone who would not stop until she got what she wanted. That night I made a decision. No more polite nods, no more benefit of the doubt. It was time to fight back, not with aggression but with something Karen clearly did not expect from a truck-driving handyman: methodical, documented, irrefutable evidence. The next morning, I called in a favor from my brother-in-law, a paralegal at a downtown law firm. "Mike, I need to know exactly what documentation I should be gathering, I explained, recounting the escalating situation. This woman is trying to get me kicked out of my home or force me to give up my business. Mike was clear and direct. Document everything, and I mean everything. Dates, times, exact wording of conversations. Photograph your truck in the spaces daily with timestamps. Save every email, note, and communication from this person or about your vehicle, and get a dash cam, one that records when the vehicle is parked. That afternoon, I purchased a dual-facing dash cam with motion detection and night vision capabilities. I set up a dedicated email folder for all HOA communications. I started a detailed journal documenting every interaction, no matter how small. The contractor and me approached this new project with the same precision I would use for building custom cabinetry, measuring twice, cutting once. My first breakthrough came unexpectedly. During a casual conversation with Mr. Diaz, an elderly resident who frequently walked his terrier past my truck, I mentioned my troubles with board member Karen Miller. Mr. Diaz paused, his friendly face creasing with confusion. Board member. The HOA board only has 5 members, son. There is Howard Jenkins as president, the Williamson couple, Dr. Patel and Maria Gonzalez. There is no Miller on the board, never has been as far as I know. This information stopped me cold. Are you certain? She has been sending official-looking emails from a Sunnyvale HOA address. Been living here 12 years, Mr. Diaz said firmly. Attend every meeting. No Karen Miller on any board. That evening, I contacted Howard Jenkins directly, introducing myself and inquiring diplomatically about the board membership. His response confirmed my suspicion. Karen Miller had never served on the HOA board in any capacity. The email address she had been using was not affiliated with the official HOA communications system. In fact, Howard seemed troubled by the information, requesting copies of the emails she had sent using the HOA name. With this confirmation, I began digging deeper. A social media search revealed Karen had only moved to Sunnyvale Gardens 4 months earlier. More telling were the community groups from her previous residences, where former neighbors had engaged in lengthy discussions about conflicts with a KM, who had appointed herself community rule enforcer at 2 previous condo associations. The most disturbing post came from an elderly woman who wrote, "After months of harassment about my garden gnomes violating aesthetic standards, I simply could not take the stress anymore. At 78, I sold my home of 12 years and moved to be near my daughter. Sometimes I still have nightmares about finding those threatening notes on my door." Armed with this information, I expanded my investigation. I began speaking with other Sunnyvale residents, careful to approach the topic neutrally. "Have you had any unusual interactions with the newer resident in Building C, the woman who sends emails about community standards?" The floodgates opened. A young mother confided that Karen had reported her for letting her children draw with sidewalk chalk. A work-from-home graphic designer had received written warnings about excessive visitor parking when his clients came for brief meetings. A college student had been accosted for unloading groceries in the fire lane for 3 minutes. None of these supposed violations had come from the actual HOA board or management. All had come from Karen, presenting herself as an authority figure. As I compiled these accounts, a clear pattern emerged of someone obsessed with control, who had driven away neighbors at previous residences and was now attempting to establish the same dominance at Sunnyvale. The final piece fell into place when I spent a full Saturday in the management office, reviewing every page of my lease agreement, the HOA bylaws, and the special accommodation documentation. There it was, in black and white. Resident in Unit 204 is hereby granted exclusive use of spaces 47 and 48 for a commercial vehicle not exceeding the dimensions specified, with the understanding that appropriate fees will be assessed monthly. The document bore the signatures of the property manager, the HOA president at that time, and myself. More importantly, I discovered that contrary to Karen's claims, the bylaws specifically included provisions for contractors, tradespeople, and business owners with commercial vehicles, acknowledging the diverse professional makeup of the community. There was no prohibition against properly registered commercial vehicles in designated spaces. That night, I spread my evidence across my kitchen table: photographs, emails, testimonies from neighbors, social media screenshots, and official documentation. The picture was clear and damning. Karen Miller had fabricated authority, misrepresented HOA policies, harassed multiple residents, and deliberately interfered with my business. She had established a pattern of this behavior across multiple communities. What had started as confusion and frustration had transformed into something else: a righteous determination to not only protect myself, but to ensure Karen could not continue this pattern of harassment against anyone else at Sunnyvale Gardens. The investigation phase was complete. Now it was time for strategy. The key here is not just defending yourself, but creating an airtight case that protects the entire community. My brother-in-law Mike advised over coffee in my apartment. We sat surrounded by the evidence I had gathered over the past 2 weeks. You need 3 things: official documentation of your rights, proof of her pattern of false authority, and demonstration of actual damages. Mike helped me organize my approach into clear, methodical steps. First, I scheduled a meeting with the actual HOA board, requesting time on their monthly agenda. I framed my presentation as addressing community concerns about parking policies and communication, keeping the tone professional rather than accusatory. Next, I consulted with a local attorney specializing in property disputes. The consultation fee of $250 was worth every penny for the legal clarity she provided. What you are describing is harassment, defamation, and potentially tortious interference with business, she explained, reviewing my documentation. The financial loss from your missed client meeting establishes actual damages, which strengthens your position considerably. The attorney drafted a formal cease and desist letter, but advised holding it in reserve. Start with the HOA channels. Document their response. If they fail to address the situation appropriately, then we escalate with legal action. She helped me prepare a detailed complaint to be filed with the property management company, complete with a chronology of events and supporting evidence. Perhaps the most important strategic decision involved documentation going forward. From this point on, assume everything will need to be proven in court, Mike had advised. Following his guidance, I installed a second, more discreet security camera with a view of my parking spaces. I purchased a small, legal recording device to document any future confrontations. I established a system for saving and backing up video footage, emails, and photographs. I also began building a coalition among the residents who had experienced similar harassment. Mrs. Abernathy from Building A, whose grandchildren had been reported for playing too loudly in the common area. Daniel Wu from the End Unit, who had received violation notices about his patio furniture. Teresa Guzman, whose service dog had been the subject of false complaints. We need to present a united front, I explained during a small gathering in my apartment. Not as angry neighbors with grudges, but as concerned community members addressing a pattern of behavior that affects everyone's quality of life. Teresa, an elementary school teacher with a gentle demeanor but firm resolve, spoke up. I have been afraid to walk my service animal at certain times because of her confrontations. This is not just annoying. It is affecting my ability to manage my medical condition." Daniel nodded in agreement. She tried to fine me $50 for having non-regulation patio chairs. I almost paid it before I realized she had no authority to collect any money. Together, we created a shared document detailing every incident, complete with dates, times, and photographs when available. 5 residents agreed to attend the HOA meeting and speak if necessary. 3 others provided written statements. What had begun as my individual problem had transformed into a community standing together against bullying and harassment. The night before the scheduled HOA meeting, I made final preparations in my apartment. My presentation was organized into clear sections: verification of my parking agreement, documentation of harassment, evidence of false authority, financial impact, and similar experiences from other residents. I had practiced delivering the information calmly and factually, without the anger that occasionally still flared when I thought about the missed Henderson contract. As I reviewed my materials one last time, I heard the familiar sound of Karen's voice outside my window, speaking loudly on her phone as she often did when patrolling the complex. No, the board simply does not enforce the rules properly. I have had to take matters into my own hands. That contractor with the monster truck is the worst offender, but I have got him on the run. Another week or 2, and he will be gone. I moved to the window and saw her standing near the community mailboxes, completely unaware she was being overheard. Her voice carried clearly in the evening air. "Of course I am not actually on the board. These people are such simpletons. Tell them you have authority and they believe you. The truck will be gone soon, one way or another." I stepped back from the window, a chill running through me despite the warm evening. Her casual confidence about forcing me out one way or another was unsettling. I added a new task to my preparation list: check the truck thoroughly before driving anywhere. As I finished organizing my materials, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. The tired, confused man who had discovered that first note was gone. In his place stood someone transformed, no longer reactive but strategic, no longer defensive but prepared. When Karen looked down from her balcony tomorrow, she would not see a contractor intimidated by her false authority. She would see someone who had methodically built a case as sturdy as any structure I had ever created. And unlike the homes and offices I built for others, this construction project was about protecting my own foundation. The rain started just after sunset, a steady downpour that drummed against my windows and turned the parking lot lights into blurry halos. I was reviewing my presentation for the HOA meeting scheduled for tomorrow when my phone chimed with an alert from the security camera. The motion detection had been triggered near my truck. I opened the app immediately, expecting perhaps a cat seeking shelter under the vehicle or a neighbor walking by with an umbrella. What I saw instead made my heart race. There on the screen, illuminated by the parking lot lights and partially obscured by rain, was Karen Miller moving purposefully alongside my F-450. At first, I thought she might be placing another note, but her movements were different, furtive, cautious, looking repeatedly over her shoulder. Then I saw what appeared to be a key or similar object in her hand. As I watched in real time, unable to believe what I was seeing, she deliberately dragged the object along the driver's side of my truck, from headlight to tail light. I bolted for the door, phone still in hand, recording the footage while sprinting down the stairs and across the parking lot. By the time I reached my truck, soaked within seconds by the downpour, Karen was hurrying toward Building C. She saw me and hesitated momentarily before continuing at a brisk pace. "I have it on video," I called after her, my voice nearly drowned by the rain. "Everything you just did." She paused at the building entrance, turning with remarkable composure. "I have no idea what you are talking about. I was checking if someone had left their lights on in the rain." Then she disappeared inside. I turned to my truck, running my fingers along the fresh gouge that extended nearly the full 22-foot length of the vehicle, a deep scratch that had cut through paint to metal, already beginning to show signs of rust in the rain. The damage would cost thousands to repair, but in that moment, I felt an odd sense of calm. Karen had finally made a mistake that could not be explained away or denied. The camera had captured everything in high definition, including clear footage of her face as she began the vandalism. The following evening, the community room was unusually full for the monthly HOA meeting. Word had spread that something significant would be addressed. Karen arrived early, dressed impeccably in a blazer and pearls, nodding confidently to several residents as if she were indeed a board official. She showed no reaction when she saw me, not a flicker of concern about the previous night's actions. When my agenda item was called, I connected my laptop to the projector and began methodically presenting the evidence I had gathered. I started with the documentation of my legitimate parking arrangement, then moved to the pattern of harassment through false notes and emails. With each slide, the room grew more attentive. Ms. Miller has repeatedly represented herself as an HOA board member or official, I explained calmly. She has used this false authority to harass multiple residents, including sending community-wide emails from an address designed to appear official. Karen interrupted, standing abruptly. "This is ridiculous. I have never claimed to be on the board. I am simply a concerned resident addressing obvious violations that the actual board has failed to handle." Her voice carried the same authoritative tone she had always used, but for the first time, I detected a note of defensiveness. Howard Jenkins, the actual board president, looked troubled. "Ms. Miller, we have copies of emails where you specifically identified yourself as the board secretary. We have no record of you ever holding that position." Karen waved dismissively. "A simple misunderstanding or typo. The important issue is the oversized commercial vehicle taking up multiple spaces contrary to bylaws." "Actually," I continued, "the bylaws specifically permit commercial vehicles in designated spaces with proper approval, which I have had for 3 years. But perhaps most concerning is what happened last night." I played the security footage. The room fell silent as they watched Karen clearly and deliberately damaging my vehicle. When I switched on the lights, Karen's face had lost all color. "That is not me," she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "The footage is unclear due to the rain. This is an attempt to frame me because I have reported legitimate violations." That was when Teresa stood up from the back of the room. "You reported my medically necessary service dog as an unauthorized pet and threatened me with fines. I have the notes you left on my door." Daniel Wu stood next. "You attempted to collect a $50 fine from me directly, claiming my patio furniture violated HOA standards. You said you were authorized to collect payments on behalf of the board." One by one, 6 different residents shared similar experiences. With each testimony, Karen's composure cracked further. When she attempted to leave midway through the presentations, Howard asked her politely but firmly to remain until the discussion was complete. By the time the property manager presented documentation showing that Karen had attempted to submit a towing authorization using a forged signature, the case was overwhelming. The board voted unanimously to issue a formal cease and desist order, requiring Karen to stop all unauthorized communications regarding HOA matters and to refrain from any contact with me or my property. As the meeting concluded, Karen sat alone, her earlier confidence replaced by rigid anger. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold. "You have no idea who you are dealing with. This is not over." But looking around at the community now united against her tactics, I knew she was wrong. This chapter, at least, was reaching its conclusion. The real question was whether legal consequences would follow, and those wheels were already in motion. The small claims court was nothing like the wood-paneled courtrooms shown on television dramas. It was a simple room with fluorescent lighting, metal folding chairs, and a modest desk where Judge Harriet Polanski presided. Despite the unimpressive surroundings, I felt the weight of the moment as I set my evidence binder on the table before me. Karen sat across the aisle, representing herself, her expression a mixture of indignation and disbelief that matters had progressed this far. Unlike her usual polished appearance at Sunnyvale Gardens, she looked slightly disheveled, as if the effort of maintaining her facade had finally become too much. In the matter of Wallace versus Miller regarding property damage and business interference, Judge Polanski announced, reviewing the file before her, "I have reviewed the submitted evidence, including the video footage and documentation of financial losses. Please present your case, Mr. Wallace." With calm precision, I walked through the events exactly as they had occurred. The legitimate parking arrangement, the escalating harassment, the deliberate scheduling of a tow truck that caused me to miss the Henderson contract, and finally, the vandalism to my vehicle captured clearly on security footage. The total damages include $3,850 for professional repair of the paint and finish on my work vehicle, plus $12,000 in lost income from the Henderson kitchen renovation contract, I concluded. I have provided documentation from both the auto body shop and the client confirming these figures. When Karen's turn came, her defense consisted primarily of attacking my character and insisting she was being persecuted for trying to maintain community standards. Judge Polanski listened patiently, but repeatedly redirected her to address the specific claims of property damage and business interference. The video could be anyone, Karen insisted. It was dark and raining, and even if I did leave a few notes about inappropriate parking, that does not make me responsible for his missed business meeting. Judge Polanski removed her reading glasses and looked directly at Karen. "Ms. Miller, the video evidence clearly shows you damaging Mr. Wallace's vehicle. 3 separate identification points confirm it was you, including recognition by multiple witnesses who know you personally. As for the business interference, your own words in the recording from your phone conversation indicate you deliberately scheduled the towing to impact Mr. Wallace's business activities." The judgment, when it came, was comprehensive. Full compensation for the vehicle repair, partial compensation for the lost contract, and all court costs. Additionally, a restraining order requiring Karen to maintain a minimum of 100 feet distance from me, my vehicle, and my assigned parking spaces. In the weeks that followed, Sunnyvale Gardens underwent subtle but significant changes. The HOA board, shaken by how easily their authority had been falsely assumed, implemented new communication protocols requiring official correspondence to include verification codes. They drafted a formal resident rights and responsibilities document that was distributed to all homeowners, with a section specifically addressing the approved protocols for dispute resolution. Most significantly, they created what residents informally called the Contractor Protection Clause, establishing clear guidelines for commercial vehicle parking and explicitly prohibiting harassment of residents based on their profession or vehicles. Howard Jenkins jokingly referred to it as the Wallace Rule during the meeting where it was unanimously approved. The property management company, eager to prevent similar issues, designated a specific section of the parking area for oversized vehicles, using the dimensions of my F-450 as the standard measure for space allocation. They installed additional security cameras covering these areas and implemented a formal process for reporting parking concerns. As for Karen Miller, she listed her unit for sale less than a month after the court ruling. I heard through the community grapevine that she was relocating to a single-family home where, as she reportedly told her realtor, there would be no need to deal with inconsiderate neighbors or their eyesore vehicles. No one at Sunnyvale seemed particularly saddened by her departure. 3 months after the court case, I pulled my freshly repaired F-450 into spaces 47 and 48, returning from a successful installation of the custom cabinetry that had secured me the new Davidson contract, a job even larger than the Henderson renovation I had lost. As I gathered my personal tools from the passenger seat, I noticed Mrs. Abernathy walking her terrier nearby. She waved cheerfully. "Beautiful evening, is it not, Mr. Wallace? That truck of yours is looking mighty fine after the repair work." I smiled, realizing I no longer instinctively scanned the balconies for watching eyes or checked my windshield for notes. "It certainly is, Mrs. Abernathy. Could not ask for a better evening." Walking toward my apartment building, keys jingling comfortably in my hand, I felt the simple pleasure of ordinary moments free from conflict. The earned peace that comes from standing your ground not through aggression, but through preparation, documentation, and insistence on the truth. My F-450 sat exactly where it belonged, in the spaces I had rightfully been assigned, a symbol not just of my livelihood, but of the principle that even the most determined bullies can be overcome when a community stands together against harassment and lies.